Hey guys, Skull here, and Preach has just released a video here called The First Fall of Method, Legacy of WoW. So I thought I'd watch it and give my own thoughts, see what he's saying about this whole thing.
One of the most startling moments in raiding history took place. Over the course of 24 hours, the champions, the reigning, dominant, multi-year heroes Method, lost practically their entire roster.
Wait. Okay, let's see. Let's see the roster. I guess this is the roster that was probably taken from like the Archimon kill, which was the most recent world first that we had before the Serenity split happened. Lots of old names here, guys. Actually, a few that I can't remember. I can't remember Gaunt. Let's see the rest. Yeah. So who's still playing today? Celia. Vikland's still playing, just not in any of the Race to World First guilds. Perfecto. Just Wait still does some stuff. Roger Brown, of course. That's it, actually. Or not that many players still playing, guys, huh? One. I guess I'm still here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Five players still involved. Barak was a really good healer, actually.
Practically their entire roster just vanished.
Not as good as Celia, though.
Gentlemen, we're going to take you on a journey of one of the most pivotal moments in raiding history. This is the beginning of when everything changed.
Peach is looking good, by the way. Untold WoW
So what
histories,
happened
or
then? They were the champions. There was nowhere else to go. Well, unfortunately, as we have proven many times in this series, being at the very high-end mythic raiding guild, whatever, does not make you immune to the same problems that happen in your normal, casual, friendly raiding guild as well. You see, all these things have one thing in common. They're full of people. And people have all kinds of opinions on all kinds of things.
that is true, actually, guys. There's a lot to be said about managing a WoW guild at any level. Like, obviously, back in the day, it was like 40-man raiding. So you had like, what, 50, 60 people in the guild, including like a ton of like casuals and whatnot as well. But, over time, obviously the raid size has dropped, but the management required has obviously moved up a lot as the competition's gotten a lot tougher and tougher. And, yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, when you're playing with some of the best players in the world, there's a lot of interesting personalities over the years, a lot of egos. So yeah, it's people management skills for like guild leaders and raid leaders and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, they probably have pretty good people management skills that are probably quite transferable actually as well. Like I remember when I applied for like my first internship, like at university, to General Electric, I included my World of Warcraft guild master experience on my CV, and we actually did talk about it a little bit in the interview, which was fun.
The landscape was changing. Now you guys are going to find this really ironic compared to what's happening these days.
True.
Sko posted in 2015. WoW raiding competition had become a two-horse race for a while.
Yeah, that is true actually. And if you guys remember as well, Paragon were swapping to 10-man as well, right? So there wasn't actually going to be like some huge competition for us, I guess you could say, moving into the next expansion after Archimon. So raiding was actually becoming, a little less competitive, I guess you could say, because we'd been quite dominant for a while with some of our world first kills. And Paragon went kind of on the decline, I guess you could say, like they were kind of disappearing. Basically because Paragon was a Finnish only guild, and so they obviously found it quite hard to continue to recruit Finnish only players. As people started getting older, as people started finishing university, and then they had to go and get a job or whatever. And this actually kind of probably leads into some of the stuff we're going to talk about in this video, actually, because one of the core reasons, obviously, that I wanted to what do you want to call it, like try and convert Method from just a World of Warcraft guild into something more, was to actually ensure that Method would still be around in the future. Because obviously we're faced with the same issues, right? Like we play with these players who have been students or whatever, then, you know, if there's not anything more to help support them, then obviously they have to stop playing the game as well at some point, right? And for me, I created Method back in 2005. So at this point in time, this video is being talked about. This is 2015. So that's 10 years, guys. So Method was like my whole life, I guess you could say, outside of, you know, everything else that's going on. So my entire passion, I guess you could say, my baby. So I started Method in the last year of secondary school. So when I was like 17, I think. And then I did, you know, 2 university degrees for 7 years, just all the time, you know, still playing and building Method, I guess you'd say, working with the guild and everything. And then I started working full-time as a financial analyst. And, you know, I kept working full-time while, you know, still building Method. But Method was like my passion, right? Method was the thing I cared about the most about. And so a lot of this was mostly about wanting to make sure like that Method was still going to be around in the future and not fade out of existence like so many guilds that we had seen before. So for example, you're looking at Paragon here, which was starting to fade out of existence at this point in time. But then look at the past, like other great guilds, you know, Death and Taxes, Nihilum, Insidia. All these guilds have a similar issue in regards to just fading out of existence because they didn't make themselves into anything other than a World of Warcraft guild, so to speak. And they didn't, what's the right word? They didn't have a way to support their players, you know, any further than just, you know, being players in the game, so to speak. And that's something that I realized that we'd have to do with Method if we want to keep Method around, because we were also having issues of people having to, you know, quit the game or finishing their studies, no longer being able to commit to the World First raiding schedule, which was already starting to get quite busy back then. So it was mostly about trying to find a way to make Method a bit more professional, you know, bring ideally some sponsors and stuff on board, being able to support the players, to make sure that Method, you know, either didn't just disappear overnight because we lost so many players to just IRL stuff, or to stop Method from just being absorbed, I guess you could say, by some other larger esports organization. Like I wanted to try and keep Method around and, you know, do our own thing, of course.
Race for a while, which was unhealthy. And the raiders were being more and more burdened with requirements to raid. They were now having to keep up maybe 2 alts and alternate classes, as Blizzard was stirring. They wanted to...
Yeah, you see, it's crazy actually to think how much more extreme it's gotten since then, of course. But even back then, guys, when obviously there was nothing in the scene, so to speak, everyone was doing this purely from a passion perspective, right? So it did start to feel more of like a job rather than just like, you know, like pure fun of like, you know, logging in for the raid and just performing at your best. Like everything was getting already a little bit more professional back then. Like if you guys remember, for example, like all the weak aura tech and everything that we used on Archimond, and just, you know, like Preach just said there, the requirement of like, you know, a lot more alts, the farming requirements to make sure your characters were ready for raids. Like it was just getting a lot more intense, but there wasn't like any, I guess you could say, additional return for the players, so to speak. And at the same time, the competitive scene was also declining a little bit in regards to like other guilds being, you know, competitive. So there was kind of a lot going on in the background.
To stop the blatant account sharing the racers were doing. And that's all well and good, but the big problem, as it regularly is, money. Business opportunities were creeping in and they were starting to get pretty lucrative. Okay, the fall...
Okay. They were starting to get pretty lucrative. So this video is based about Serenity, right, before, like 2015. Actually, business opportunities were really not lucrative back in 2015. Like, sponsorships were incredibly small, and it was very difficult to get brands interested in a World of Warcraft guild, of course, right? I mean, this is a core reason why I tried to expand Method out into working, you know, with content creators, other, you know, teams that were in like competitive tournaments, like a PvP team. And also I think, maybe some other stuff. But there was really hardly any money in the scene back then. Like this, back in 2015, I was still working full-time as a financial analyst, like I mentioned. So there was really not much going on. Like Twitch had only really been a big thing, or not a big thing, but it only launched around like what, for 2011, 2012 for us. I think MOP launch was the first time that I ever started streaming, and back then it was only like once or twice a week. And to be honest, like maybe Preach talks about this in the video, we'll see, but there was so much resistance from the guild like back then, to actually stream our raids and stuff like that. Like, even the farm raids, like it was like people hated streaming in the guild. So there was definitely a few clashes about that. Like basically they didn't want to stream our raids or whatever. Yeah, so
All of a
we'll see.
guild isn't usually a snap thing. It's a combination of things over time that explodes, so let's set the scene for you. Over the past couple of years, the leadership of Method had changed a lot in terms of who was doing which task. Famously, incredible raid leader Kuznam had taken nearly all the raid management work. Officer Potham had become the primary organizer of the guild as a whole. Players such as Infield.
Uh, I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that comment, so to speak. Like the officer core was still the same as it had been for years. Like Kuzan was the raid leader before this as well. It was just a case of, I guess, yeah, I guess certain people like you mentioned there, like Kuznam and Parton with the Recore tech, maybe started doing it a little bit more. But I think the overall issue here was that, like Kuznam, for example, and I guess Parton and a few others, didn't really agree with the direction that we were taking things. So like I said, the whole direction I was trying to take was that we want Method to be around for, years to come. We obviously want to, try and build something a bit more sustainable where we can actually, support players, so to speak. Try and keep the guild going, basically. And there was still a little bit of a pushback, I guess you could say, from Kuznam and Co., who basically just wanted to play the game and not really take things much further than that, so to speak. But let's see.
Others were now add-on specialists, and more duties had begun filtering down to not just officers, but the members as well. The thing is, none of them were technically the leader of this ship. That, as most know, was
Wait. Okay. There's no way that my head is on Joffrey here, guys, or? Is that Joffrey? Also, I had a lot more hair in this picture, guys. Yeah. Maybe I need to grow it back out again.
Go. Sko had begun moving further and further away from the WoW day-to-day guild activities.
So, in regards to this, that is kind of true, but it's not necessarily for the reason that he's, I guess you could say, insinuating here. It was obviously a combination of things, but honestly, guys, mostly it was because it was just crazy trying to obviously work full-time in finance, where you're doing obviously more than 40 hours a week in most places, and still trying to keep up with like the increasing grind of getting your characters ready, but at the same time then also being an officer, trying to manage the guild, and then at the same time trying to build Method into something more than a guild, like on in addition to that, right? So basically that was definitely probably something that impacted things.
And more into the brand that was Method and what its future held. The business prospects of
I think this was the 2014 BlizzCon, actually, if I'm not mistaken. There's Blatty, obviously Eon as well.
Method. And I don't mean Method WoW,
Trekkie,
but Method as a potential
Roger.
Major esports org.
Wait, where am I on this? Wait, guys, they cut me out.
They had a pro CSGO team.
Okay, so the CSGO team that's being talked about here, you can see this is actually a clip from the Gfinity Elite series. This is not until much later down the line, like years from now, I think, like maybe like 16, 17. So it's not like current footage. We did pick up like a US CS team, I think in 2015, but it was a very low like commitment, like investment. Again, this was like our I guess you could say our attempt to try and make Method more than just a WoW guild, right? So we want to be in the bigger picture, or in the conversation, I guess you could say, with brands when it came to working with brands. Obviously, they want to work with people who are giving them exposure. Whether it's content creators, whether it's winning tournaments or like pro teams. Because at that moment in time, we had very little actual content creators and almost no streaming presence in the Method guild. Because we had very little streamers, and the guild itself really did not like streaming, like not even our farm raids. So actually, if you want to stream in the Method guild, there was so much like pushback against it. Like you actually almost, in some cases, it felt like people who wanted to stream almost kind of got a little bit bullied in the guild. Like I guess I don't need to name names, but I think this has kind of been touched on in the past about some people not getting treated that well by certain people in the guild because they wanted to stream or they were streaming. So there was kind of a negative environment towards streaming. which at the same time made it almost impossible to actually get people interested in the Method Guild because, outside of our competitive success, which a lot of people weren't caring that much about in regards to World of Warcraft at the time, because we didn't, obviously there was no Race to World First like actually being streamed or anything. We also had very little content creators.
And WoW PvP teams. As such, new and uncomfortable terms started to be thrown around, like streaming. Completely ridiculous. Now remember, this was 2015.
Yeah.
The first broadcasted Race to World First wasn't until September 2018.
Yeah, so I try to do quite a bit of streaming, guys, because obviously, like I said, I'm trying to position Method in a certain way to make sure Method it was lasting, long into the future. And again, this caused a bit of issues in the guild. Like people didn't really agree with it, right? Like that's definitely one of the underlying concerns, I guess, that some people had. Also, at this point in time, I was only streaming like once or twice a week, to be honest.
Personal experience with, and I've talked about it a few times. When I joined Method for the second time, I was a young, up-and-coming YouTuber making scuff-ass videos with a bad microphone in a backroom bedroom.
Nice motto.
But I did make videos, and after my very first raid coming back to Method, I made a video talking about that raid. The very next day, that video was now on the front page of the Method website. This actually caused me a lot of heat with the guild. People were under the assumption.
Yeah, so you see, he actually mentions it there too, guys, right? Like the guild, a lot of the guild in general, it's so weird to say, but they were against like content creation, like streaming, creating content about like the guild or whatever. Yeah, like that was just a big divide, I guess you could say. It's just a different mindset, right? Like I understand obviously why some people would want to do that and want to just play the game and then just stop playing it, whatever. But for me, like I said, I was really trying to make sure that Method was going to be around in the years to come, right? So we had to try and build it into something more than just a WoW guild. Otherwise, Method was going to fade out of existence in the next few years. Like it's just inevitable. Like every other WoW guild out there, basically.
That I had been brought back because of my YouTube presence. I was there to bring attention and eyeballs to Method. That wasn't the case at all, and I wanted to prove myself. And they hadn't asked permission. So I sent a message saying, you guys need to take that video down, and you need to ask me if you want to use my content that way. Now, in their defense, they did. They took it down immediately and never did anything else. However,
I actually don't remember this particular incident that he's talking about, but he obviously, it's his video, so it probably definitely happened.
I was then called into a meeting with Method management. I thought I was in trouble. But no, I was called into a meeting to discuss Method's future branding opportunities and revenue streams through YouTube, how they could grow their brand that way.
Okay.
As you can see,
I actually, again, I don't remember that specific conversation, but Preach obviously remembers it probably quite well, so I'm sure again that probably happened.
Idea of branding, growth, and marketing has been a big push internally at Method for a very long time, because that was in 2012. So in the months leading to the breakup, cliques were forming, as they do with most people not being interested in the Method brand, marketing, PvP teams, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So he kind of touches on here what I was saying before, right? Like there's certain people in the guild, including people like Kuznam, for example, who only want to play the game, right? Like didn't want to really build Method into anything other than just the WoW guild. And like I said, that was obviously a difference in opinion that he and a few others shared, and that was obviously one of the main reasons why ultimately the Serenity split happened. Really, just a difference in opinion about what the next step should be for like the guild in general and the wider like Method organization.
And certainly not streaming progression. At the same time, not being happy that as they saw it, they were doing most of the work for Method Guild, which was making the money. But the money appeared to be flowing to mostly one person.
Okay, that is... I mean, that statement is just, I don't know, that's definitely... I mean, in my opinion, of course, total nonsense. Like, that didn't actually happen. Again, in 2015, the money involved in, like, the guild and, like, the wider Method, like, activities was so small. And at the same time, like I mentioned, just up until... what it was, I think August 2015, I was still working full-time, and then after that, when I stopped working full-time, basically any money I was able to make was basically from the content creation in terms of like streaming on Twitch or similar. In terms of money from Method, it was so small, and it was any money was basically reinvested into the org or to the players and whatnot, right? So Yeah, I think that's a big misconception.
just want
Like maybe even at some point in time, guys, like it would be interesting to talk about how much money Method actually has made over the years, because it would be quite surprising to a lot of people that most of it has. I mean, of course, it's just been reinvested in things like, even like, for example, the race world first popping off and whatnot. You guys wouldn't believe how long it took for brands to kind of catch up and understand like the size and scale of that opportunity. While of course, like the putting on the events and everything, extremely expensive and so on. But I think there's always this misconception, I guess you could say, that there's a ton of money and it's, people aren't seeing it, so to speak.
to game, push world first with their friends, and not be a part of some big corporation.
Okay. I get not. At least I'm not jumping this time, guys. But I guess they're indicating that meant to be Galliux here speaking to like the officers, and we know what happens in this cutscene. This is actually one of the few cutscenes in the recent patches that I have actually seen. Right?
The clearest public example of this came from member Tegu, who posted this when he left. I was quite disappointed how the guild meeting went last night, and how much was talked about.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. This goes back to the misconception from some of the players that there was a lot of money flowing into the org and that they weren't seeing enough of it, so to speak. Again, that just didn't happen in reality. But it's very difficult to actually change someone's opinion about that, so to speak. But ultimately, again, like the thought process behind this is, of course, let's try and make Method into more of a guild. Let's ideally, do more content creation. Get more streamers interested in actually streaming. Let's work with some content creators. Let's work with some other teams, like YPUP and so on, so that we can actually attract sponsors. Then, of course, once we attract sponsors, we can push more money back into the guild, and we can actually, give people an incentive, like to actually stay around, right? Like, so we be able to stop players from like quitting the game or whatever, right? Like some of our best players that would allow us to still be competitive and actually really still push Method as a world first rating guild. We'd make sure that Method had longevity. We'd make sure that we didn't get absorbed by like another, esports organization or just fade out of existence. And historically, like this has happened so many times that we've only been able to keep like some of the best players around because we were able to offer them like additional incentives or compensation, so to speak. Like there's actually like, even for example, Scripe, like when he was very leading Method, like there was actually instances where Scripe would have just quit the game full out if we weren't actually able to, of course, compensate him, for the time that he was putting into the game and everything, because he had to get a job or whatever, right? That's a situation that there were often. You guys can imagine now in the professional scene that we're in right now. It's always impossible to kind of imagine what we're talking about here, but there was a big gap there
About money. This was a part of the exodus of every single member and officer of Method, excluding just
Bro,
two.
Fragments.
Just wait.
I see Fragments' name there. Like, Fragments has left Method and rejoined Method, honestly, guys, at this point in time, like 4 times. It's actually wild. Love the guy, though.
Roger Brown. And of course, Sko. Practically.
There's someone missing here, actually. I'm pretty sure Perfecto was still part of the team as well. Like, I don't think Perfecto left.
The entire roster left within a few hours.
Also, Sloopbag joined Serenity, guys. That was a real sore point for me, actually. Like, I've talked to Sloopbag, obviously, since then. But Sloopbag was meant to join Method just before this kind of happened, right? Like, me and Sloopbag were pretty close. Like, we hung out all the time at, like, BlizzCon, blah, blah. And Sloopbag was actually meant to join Method. Then, obviously, when the Serenity stuff happened, he went to join Serenity instead. And so that was that felt like a real sore spot, to be fair. But it's all water under the bridge, guys. Obviously, it was the sore spot, of course, was that the guild had just decided that they wanted to go and do their own thing with Serenity. That was obviously a much bigger thing. So.
Hours. This, of course, led to the internet meme of Skull was the problem. But was that true? A few hours after the exodus, Skull...
Okay, so here's actually my statement that I made, guys. Let's see. As you're probably aware, there are big changes happening Method. A lot of issues at play that caused this, some more complex than others. Been a pretty bad atmosphere, strained relationships in Method. And while in the past, the unified goal of pushing for World First has kept the guild together, this is evidently no longer the case. In short, a very basic summary of issues that caused the separation. So World of Warcraft, hardcore rating in decline, lack of competition. The efforts required to raid at hardcore level is not necessarily enjoyed as much as it previously was. I kind of mentioned that already. People are motivated by different things at various levels. and as always, external factors like money are involved. Yeah, we talked about that. Lack of leadership. The members' faith in the officer team's ability to lead due to motivation and drive wasn't at its strongest. This, over time, there's been a transfer of power between the officer teams and the members. For example, raid leading was done by Kuznam, and certain other activities were being organized by members. Yeah, so this is also, I mentioned that earlier, right? Like previously. So yeah, unfortunately, key people such as Kuznam, raid leader, and Parham, the guy who organized a lot of the Archimon stuff, including like the Weaker attack and stuff, have decided they'd rather start fresh in a new guild alongside those that they closely associate with. So basically, guys, the problem that you have here when the guild obviously follows generally the raid leader, right? So when Kuznam and a couple of like his like a handful of his like close, I guess you could say, buddies decide they want to do something, then obviously most people are going to follow the raid leader because they think that's what makes the most sense, right? Like they're used to obviously that person being the leader of the guild. So yeah, as I say here, many members will obviously follow the raid leader, which is understandable. So in regards to the feature of method, zero intentional method guild die. We're going to use the resource at disposal to rebuild the guild. And I already started speaking to people like really quickly after this. I spoke to a lot of people, obviously, guys. I was never going to give up on method, right? Like it's something that I was building at that point in time for over 10 years. And I was so determined to make sure that method existed into the future. Which was my motivation and drive for a lot of this prior to even the guild split, right? So there's also even talk here at the bottom about investigating the possibility of streaming the entire progression, because again, that was an idea to really try and incite, I guess you could say, a lot more interest and excitement into the raiding side of things again, while also being able to create a lot of content and like attract, hopefully, eventually sponsors and brands to be interested in what we're doing, which will allow us to obviously secure method's longevity and actually, give back to the team and the players to keep them around.
Took to Facebook to give his side. In that post, it is confirmed the issues mentioned above and that he was indeed pushing in 2015 for Method to start streaming the Race to World First. Dudes, the idea of streaming the race in 2016 is completely insane. I know it's normal to you now, but you've got to look back then.
Yes and no. Yes, because streaming was still quite early in World of Warcraft back then, but it was starting to pick up a lot of traction. Like obviously we had quite a few streamers by 2015, I guess you could say, or at least some people in the guild were streaming, which I mentioned before wasn't always seen that positively by the guild. However, there wasn't actually that much competition for us either, right? So this was actually an opportunity again for us to, stream, probably still win, and at the same time, get people interested in what we're doing. So it was definitely something to consider even back then.
Streaming had just begun to exist.
But what's funny is that actually when Serenity obviously was formed, and then we had to compete against Serenity with Method, then streaming obviously had to be put on the back burner because again, if Serenity wasn't going to stream, then obviously we couldn't stream because all of a sudden we had like tough competition in the raiding scene again. So that was why it was put on the back burner, guys, until like you Preach mentioned earlier in the video, like September 2018.
And the idea of the average WoW player wanting to sit in front of a camera with microphones on all day, every day, was extremely uncomfortable. So it is no surprise that a lot of the guild were against this idea. In September 2015, an announcement was made. A new guild, a new dream was coming. Serenity had arrived, comprising practically all the...
You actually can't imagine, by the way, guys, like, I don't know, man, like when the Serenity split happened and they created the new Serenity guild, like, yeah, it definitely sucked a lot, like, because like I said, a lot of like players that I played with for quite a few years had actually followed, Kuznam and co to create Serenity, and yeah, it really sucked, like it really sucked, like obviously you can imagine like how it felt for me, so to speak. It was really rough, actually, yeah. Bad times.
Former Method World First Raiders, and now including some fresh up-and-coming players who might be decent. They had a chance. They had done some good challenge mode times in Mists of Pandaria, like this Gingy guy, whoever he was.
Okay.
Serenity was to be a no BS, no fluff, just gamers with skill and experience going in.
What's interesting, actually, guys, is that Gingy, Deep Shades, Fragments, and I think it was Lozelle at the time, they were the first 4 guys to come to Method after the Serenity split. So they were the first 4 that kind of jumped back into Method. Yeah.
To kick ass.
This team has everything, right? They have veterans who have a massive history of getting raced to world first. They have seen the light before, and now they're free. They're free of corporate overlords. They're free of...
I mean, listen, I would hardly call it corporate overlords, guys. This is a gross exaggeration for sure. Like, I mean, yeah, like back then, 2015, like even now, like I mean, it's still very, very casual, I guess you could say. We're all gamers at the end of the day. Like, it wasn't like a corporate environment at all, really. Yeah,
chasing money as a factor, and they can just gain.
like, it was just honestly like friends and like fellow players like playing a game. Like it
bound
was
to win, right? No. In May 2017, Serenity disbanded, having never achieved that world first that they had fought so hard for. So what happened?
Let's start with Serenity. They had an absolutely stellar roster of players. However, you old schoolers will remember the raid drought of Hellfire Citadel. Archimonde fell for these guys in July 2015. We didn't get a new raid tier until September 2016.
That's wild, actually. I had actually forgotten how long a gap this had been, guys. This is actually crazy to think about. But obviously, during that time, of course, Method was able to rebuild quite a bit, which I guess obviously wasn't bad for us at the time.
Over a year of nothing to do. It was a dark time for us all. Over that time, Serenity lost at least 4 of their world first level healers. Over the time Serenity played, you will notice strange names appear in their raid frames. I won't say who, but one of these was the infamous mage Kuznam, now playing a healer to cover the losses. It is widely known that at the world first level, healers are insanely hard to come by. In Kuznam's
That is actually true, by the way, guys. Healers are really, really difficult to find in the race world first. Like, getting good healers is really, really difficult. It's something that we've actually worked years on, really, with Method, recently, even.
time at post, he mentioned that in Serenity...
Oh, wait, that's interesting, actually. Let me go back. So this is Kuznam's leaving post, guys. Like, disbanding post with Serenity. I remember here, look, let's see. To end it off with, thank you to Method for the motivation you brought since we split up, and thank you for our times back in the day before we ditched. Props to you, Sco, for building the brand you've always talked about. I've been in it, and I want to give you a massive kudos of respect to you for not burning out. Like this, I remember reading this, guys, when Kuznam posted the statement all those years ago, and it was really nice to hear. Like, big respect to Kuznam for, saying this. Yeah, a true competitor, like, bowing out. That was very respectful for sure. Yeah, really appreciated that.
Mentioned that in Serenity's short lifespan, they had over 50 members of the...
Yeah, it's actually funny, guys, that they mentioned this here, like the sponsors that they've had as well with Serenity, because, like I said, they were quite against like the sponsor stuff originally, but then over time, I guess everyone changes eventually.
Hell, at
when they
one
realize
point,
the
they even recruited
the need for it, so to
Loz
speak.
of Fat Boss TV. That's how desperate they were.
I'm joking. Loz is easily one of the best healers in the world.
They just couldn't recover that hole. They were exceptional, though, achieving World 3rd Xavius, World 2nd Helya, and World 2nd Gul'dan before disbanding. What made it really bad, though, was on Helya and on Xavius, they were beaten by none other than Method?
How?
Yeah, this was an incredible comeback indeed. Like, there was, yeah, definitely one for the history books.
How in the hell did Method lose its entire roster and then the very next raid tier beat that previous roster? And do you know what made it infinitely worse, to pour salt in that wound? When Method did overtake Serenity, Sco sent them this.
Oh my god. Oh Yeah, that tweet, guys. The gif of the Warcraft movie where he offers his hand and then he pulls it away. I remember like talking on methods like TeamSpeak back in the day about whether I should post this or not, but most people thought it would be funny. But it was definitely an iconic moment for sure.
So let's leave Serenity and look at what Method did. Sko went on the hunt immediately, and as it turns out, a chance meeting at an airport between Sko and the raid leader of the then World 6 Guild Rapid Eye Movement would change everything. After messages have been passed between a lot of potential guilds, the Rapid Eye Movement guild.
That's actually not 100% true, right? Like, I actually didn't meet Scripe at the airport. I met Zerps, who was an officer in Rapid Eye Movement.
Guild seemed receptive to a possible guild merger. Their leader, known as Scripe, happened to be passing through the same city as Sko, and so they met and they had a coffee
So this
together.
should be Zerps.
In that conversation, it was decided that Rapid Eye Movement would indeed move and change name to Method, bringing their players you may know like Deep Shades, Revez, Narcales, Noggy, Potter, amongst many others with him. Method, of course, offered management, money, and a chance at moving to the big show. And it turned out this Scripe guy was pretty good at raid leading, and he seemingly had an immediate connection with Roger Brown. Maybe they'll be friends one day. In the Trial of Valor, the new Method Guild got their first world first.
Anything you have, boys. Last one. Anything you have.
Good memories, guys. Nice that showing Noggy POV as well, guys. He's still in Method now.
At the end of it all, after a decisive victory from their former guild, many of those same
Hey, look, it's Fragments of Statement, guys. Hashtag score wasn't the problem.
players would end up right back where they started, with that Method name above their heads, cementing them, though, as the dominant world-first guild. At least for now.
For now, guys, for now.
So why then did they accept all these players back who had left en masse just 7 months ago? There's a good lesson for us all here. Permanently burning bridges because of a spat or an incident, especially over minor things that happened months ago, isn't a particularly great idea.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's actually... There's no reason why we wouldn't accept back players into Method for the most part. Like, me personally, I don't really hold, like, grudges, so to speak, or, like, I think it's, like, just in general, I don't really hold, like, a hate or, like, dislike towards people. I think it's, like, really unhealthy just from, like, your own personal mindset side of things. And for the most part, like, most of the players, you can understand why they left, right? Like, originally to join Serenity. It's because, obviously, the raid leader and some of the core... people that are associated with him also, left, and so they thought it was their best chance to obviously still compete at the level they wanted to play at. So like no issue really with like the individual players who left. It's understandable. It obviously really, really sucked, and it made me feel like terrible, of course, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Especially when the landscape around those frustrations has changed. Let's take the obvious example, streaming. It is a relatively new hobby, but 7 months later, it was taking off in a big way.
Yeah, this changed so much, guys, over time. You would not believe it. Like, the resistance in the guild to streaming and creating content completely changed. Like, I guess that's also because it was a new guild, right? Like, Method was new at that point in time, but obviously the guys in Serenity adapted to that as well, most of them over time as well. Like, the mindset around streaming and creating content and working with sponsors, working with brands, like... It took people a lot longer to catch up to what was going on than would have been ideal, obviously, in like the raiding scene. But ultimately, everyone did. So big shout out, I guess, to some of the guys who were a little bit earlier in the adoption and actually did, want to create content and do streaming and whatnot. Like I said, it wasn't always the easiest time for them back in the old Method, like pre-Serenity. Like there was definitely some pretty unfair behavior towards some of those people. Yeah.
And frankly, some of these players were really good at it and enjoyed it and were having a lot of fun with it. so the idea of streaming the race was not as big of a deal anymore. On top of that, you're aiming for world first, the pinnacle of the pinnacle in a game with millions of players.
Exactly. So, and that was it, right? In the end, guys, like that was also a core part of this, right? Like, I wanted to make sure that Method was going to be world first, like going forward. Like that was like my ultimate goal. Like, was the competitive performance of the guild. Like, and so that was a big part of it, right? Because if we had the best players, we were able to keep the best players around, and we were also able to monetize in some way that we could also compensate the players, which means they wouldn't want to leave to other teams, or they wouldn't want to quit the game, or like lots of things really. Like it was just all a case of really trying to make sure that Method was able to support the best players and support the best guild. Yeah, and actually it's worth saying too, guys, I guess, that just in general, I will say that one of the thing I'm probably proudest about with Method, like in everything that we've done over like the 20 years of a Method existing, is that we have been able to support like a lot of people in the WoW scene, and other games too, but mostly the WoW scene. Like in regards to like a lot of the biggest streamers that you even see today, for example, on Twitch, they were in Method at some point in their early days, and we were able to obviously help them, turn their passion into like their full-time thing, and that's something that I'm really proud of, that we were able to do, and I'm glad that we were able to do that.
Refusing the best of the best, the proven, seasoned players, not a particularly good idea. And so, these guys were still playing together. They might not have been in the same guild, but with Mythic Plus coming in Legion, a lot of crossover was still happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. Also, I want to just share an observation that I've had as well, guys, that you don't really realize when you're like super young. But it's Preach kind of mentioned a little bit here too. You don't realize that the people like that you interact with, like or the industry or like the environment that you operate in, it's a lot smaller than you think. Like the same people will often be around for a long time to come, and so it's relationships and treating people like well and whatnot is really important, because you never know like when you're going to be like playing with them again or working with them again, or they're going to be in Method again. Like for example, like I mentioned, Fragnet's joined like 4 times. Like there's so many of like the old guys that you've seen in this video, even like Noggy, Zalia, and co, that are actually back in Method now. You know what I mean? So it's really important to keep that in mind. Like yeah, you don't want to burn bridges. You want to treat everyone with respect and treat everyone well as best you can.
And they were more than welcomed back after a little bit of a conversation. It's a good thing to happen. However, Noah's no. This wasn't to be the last mass exodus from Method. But that is a story for another time. Until then, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
Overall, by the way, I think this is a really good video from Preach. Like I actually really appreciate Preach doing these legacy videos. Like I know that he did one about like the world first legit kill on Vash, like back in the day in TBC. I do think this is a good video, so big shout out to Preach for doing this. Like in general, like most of the information in this video is mostly accurate, I would say, with a lot of missing context, of course, right, and maybe some oversimplifications of certain things, but obviously from him being on the outside for the most part, I think he did a pretty good job in regards to putting this video together. Yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed watching the Preach video, and I thought I would add a little bit of additional commentary, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that too, and I'll see you guys on either the next video or when I start streaming again at some point in the very near future. All right, see you guys.